What's going on, guys? This is Waylon Martin with Bodybuilding.News. With the recent Olympic Games, we're going to be talking about bodybuilding as a sport in those games and the possibility of that going into the future. As well, we're going to be talking about some of the previous attempts to get this done and some of the possible reasons as to why this hasn't happened yet. One of the early initiatives of the Weider brothers was to get the sport of bodybuilding recognized by the Olympic Games. Starting in the 1980s, Ben Weider specifically made a very strong push to get bodybuilding into the games. And in 1998, although the sport gained temporary recognition from the IOC, it lost it later on in 2001. What many fail to recognize is that although bodybuilding isn't the larger Olympic Games anymore, it is, however, a participating sport at the sub-games. This includes regional biannual games that are recognized by the Olympics, such as the Southeast Asian Games. And more recently, the Olympic recognized European Games also had a bodybuilding division. However, this only went up to the classic class. And does the inclusion of events such as classic physique help the sport of bodybuilding, or does it hinder it? Because with the lack of open bodybuilding, it's really setting back the potential of the physiques, etc. So although bodybuilding is held at the Summer Olympic Games, such as those in Brazil, it is recognized regionally at some levels, which makes it one or two steps away from actually being a participant in the larger games. However, there's both efforts to keep it out of the games as well as to include it into the games. Though both sides of the argument have the sport's greater good in mind, there's conflicting interest into whether the games should recognize the sport of bodybuilding or not. This is because the international IFBB, the amateur version that leads into the IFBB Pro League, has conflicting interest with the IFBB Professional League and MPC organization. Well, many feel that in some ways, bodybuilding in the Olympics would mean its validation as a sport. With organizations such as the NBA and FILA that are so strong, the Olympic Games really can't touch them. And so an NBA Finals Championship or a World Cup, for example, are very prestigious titles and actually more prestigious than an Olympic event. There are also those that have seen the impact the Olympic Games have had on sports, where the games themselves try to become larger than the organizations that join them in participation. For example, wrestling. Ben Weider made a strong effort to get bodybuilding recognized by the Olympic Games. However, IFBB International President Rafael Sandoja has taken the reins and gone even further with these efforts. Not only has Sandoja made appearances at regional events such as the Asian Games and the European Games, but also at the most recent Olympic Games in Rio. Another big factor in all of this is the use of performance-enhancing supplements. Though bodybuilding is no different than any other sport, and the athletes are looking for almost any advantage they can get, in an effort to get recognized by the games, Sandoja has initiated drug testing at some of the events, going so far as to make the IFBB Amateur a participant of the WADA World Anti-Doping program. This has led to testing at events such as the Amateur Olympia in Australia. On good word though, even in Australia, there was only one amateur competitor actually tested, although allegedly these tests were up to WADA standards. And that guy didn't even win his class in men's physique. Trying to make a positive image for itself, the IFBB International has to maintain this facade. And so it keeps up an anti-doping policy on its website that you can do for yourself, which though well-intentioned, it seems a little self-destructive in that it doesn't look at the realities of the sport of bodybuilding and sport in general. This doesn't mean that there isn't a real possibility that bodybuilding could eventually be in the Olympics. But in 2016, we've already seen all the negative impacts that the Olympic Games have had for other organizations and even the locations they're held at. But with decreasing viewership, is this recognition in 2016 and beyond going to legitimize the sport any further? Does bodybuilding need the Olympics, or do the Olympics need bodybuilding? And guys, if you like this video, be sure to subscribe on our YouTube page, Bodybuilding.News, where we have a bunch of various content, everything pertaining to bodybuilding.